Actually, before the call, I went and restarted my mic and stuff. So hopefully I got ahead of it on that.
Yep. Well, we got your back just in case.
Excellent. All right. We're live on YouTube. I'm going to pause that. We had we had, I believe, about 85. Joe Cunningham's there. About 85 replies to this today.
It's exciting.
So yeah. All right. I want to move my little scripts over here. I think we should let Joe in.
Yep. I think we're live on YouTube.
I'm going to quick send a reminder out to Kristen. Oh, hold it. She knows. I just don't see her in yet.
Yeah, she sent a text if she was asking for the link. Do you have that on your phone readily available?
Yeah. I'm going to text it to her. Oh, heck, where did that go? Over there.
I've got it if you don't have it yet, Scott.
All but the first letter of join. So it's got the main link and then our meeting ID stuff.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, and there we got it again. Cool. All right. There she is. Excellent. Let's make her a co-host as well. All right. All right, guys, at 7 o'clock, I'm going to start letting folks in. We're going to give it a couple of minutes as the room populates, and I've got my little agenda ahead of me, so hopefully we can kind of keep things on track and get rolling here.
Exciting.
I'm going to ask Kristen basically to be the watcher of new people coming into the waiting room after I'm done clicking through our batch here. Thank you, Kristen, for that. This is exciting for me to see. This is one of our more populated meetings already, and we're not fully populated, I don't believe. All right, I'm going to do a real quick double check. Everybody, can you hear my mic? I'm not talking too soft.
Nope, perfect.
All right, all right. Ba, 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 ba. We're going to give it about a minute or two yet. And I see we're just rolling up on 7:02, which is traditionally when I like to get started. I want to give it an extra minute or two tonight. So please bear with me. Kristen, can you see these waiting rooms? Are they coming in when you're clicking admit?
I'm not actually. I
Okay.
just tried to sign in. So I'm on the phone with for my video, but I just signed in as Kristen_2. If you don't mind just making that a host as well, if possible, I think that's going to help me with seeing the people.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
There we go. All right, make sure I got my little disclaimer up in front of me, and we are just about ready to go. Now I'm going to check with Kristen to see if she can just. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. All righty, we're clicking up on 7:04. Let's just give this another 20 seconds. Don't expect me to do the Jeopardy tune as much as I want to.
Copyright.
Yeah. That's okay. I'm so out of tune, it would never match anyhow. All right, close enough. We're clicking over to 7:04. I want to welcome everybody tonight to our weekly South Carolina Normal Cannabis Conversation. I want to welcome everybody who's on the call with us live. I'd like to welcome anybody who's watching on our YouTube channel live, and also welcome anybody who's watching on YouTube at a later time. Mentioning YouTube, I just like to point out to everybody that we are not monitoring the YouTube live, so we're not watching any comments on there, questions or concerns. But if you do have comments, questions, or concerns, leave them down below in the comment section. Once it finishes rendering on YouTube, we will come back in and try and address your comments, questions, and concerns. Again, my name is Scott Weldon. I'm the Executive Director of the South Carolina chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, better known to y'all as NORML. All of our meetings are an environment of education and awareness and are not an open market for the sale, purchase, or distribution of cannabis. We do not encourage or condone illegal behavior of any kind. All right, let me real quick peek at our agenda. We done good. I'm going to start basically by welcoming our board members who are on here with us tonight. We have Kristen Momert, our Deputy Director. We have Michael Knight, our Treasurer. We have Vaughn Postema, our Secretary. They are going to be our dedicated question askers tonight, just to sort of keep things organized as best as we can. As you all know, we reached out earlier in the week through our social media and through our website requesting that people send us any questions they may have. What we tried to do as a board is filter through them and sort of blend them and or word them a little, maybe a little differently for clarity's sake. And we're going to be posing those questions for you tonight. We might throw in one or two of our own, but for the most part, I believe these are questions that you all sent to us. Real quick, I am going to introduce, let me see. I thought, oh, Tyler Jones. I wanted to introduce Tyler Jones first. Tyler, are you there?
Hey, I'm here.
Do you mind if I introduce you first and ask you then to introduce our special guest?
Happy to.
All right. This is Tyler Jones. He contacted me as a representative of Straight Talk Media. Uh-oh. I thought I had it and I forgot it. Strategically Speaking. Thank you. And they contacted me. I believe you're handling Joe's campaign. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. You've got the floor if you don't mind.
Sure. And Scott, thanks for having us and looking forward to the conversation tonight. But I won't keep you. I'm proud to work for our next speaker, Joe Cunningham, for since the beginning of his first campaign. And he's become a good friend and obviously has gone to some pretty high heights recently. So It's my honor to work for him and to help him on this journey. So I want to introduce your next governor, Joe Cunningham.
A little round of applause. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Tyler, for the introduction. Can you all hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
All right. In the world of Zoom, you can never be too sure. Want to say thanks for having me tonight. Very, very timely, especially what's going on in the Senate right now. Yes, for those of you who may not know me, let me give you just a brief background where I come from. I jumped into public service back in 2017 after we saw the election of President Trump, and I just did not want to stand on the sidelines. I wanted to do something about it, and I didn't see the checks and balances that we so desperately needed in Washington, D.C. And so I jumped in as a very much a long shot candidate for Congress back in 2018, the 2018 cycle. Had no political experience. I had no money. I had no name ID, and according to most political pundits, all political pundits, no shot at winning in a gerrymandered district. This is a district that Trump had won by 13 points in 2016. It was a district that Mark Sanford had won by 22 points. Was a district that never should have flipped, but we ran a different style campaign where we went to every corner of the district and we talked to everyone and we talked to people about their issues that are important to them. And on election night, the pundits gave us a 9% chance at winning. Despite that, we did the impossible and carried out what the Post and Courier called the greatest political upset in modern history. And while in Congress, I fought for common sense solutions. I fought for bipartisanship. I was proud to be ranked one of the most effective and most bipartisan members in Congress. I had 2 of my bills make it through a divided Congress and get signed into law by a Republican president. And I was providing real change, significant impact. And the Republican Party saw that and decided they would spend as much as it took to try to take this seat back. And so they spent tens of millions of dollars on that race. President Trump came to the district, campaigned against me. He tweeted against me, tweeted in support of my opponent. And despite the fact that President Trump carried our district in 2020 by 6 points, we only lost by 1 point. And so that gives you an indication as to the amount of crossover support, probably unparalleled across the country, that we enjoyed here in the 1st congressional district. And after the election, I gave some serious thought to running for my seat again, but I kind of went back to why I ran in the first place. And I ran in the first place in 2018 because Congress is where I saw the need was. We didn't have any checks and balances. Republicans had full control. Even though I lost in 2020, what I saw was we had President Joe Biden in the White House and Democrats controlled the House and the Senate. And I couldn't ignore just the chaos that was coming out of Columbia in 2020, 2021. The fact that we are going through a pandemic and the first bill this governor focused on was the most restrictive abortion bill in our country. And after that, it was allowing people to carry firearms on their hips with no training. And then after that, bring back firing squads and even a bill to bury Donald Trump on the state house grounds. It became very apparent very quickly that the need was right here in our backyard, and the need was in Columbia. And the quickest way to effectuate change, because we cannot, as Democrats, take back the state Senate or the state House this coming year, the quickest way to make change was through the governor's mansion. And so that is why I launched my bid for governor a couple of months ago. And we've had remarkable success since then. In the first 2 days of our campaign, we outraised what the sitting governor had raised in 3 months. We've been picking up a lot of support across the state. We launched a 46 county tour where we're going to every single corner of the state. And we've already knocked off a dozen counties so far. We'll be up in the upstate this coming weekend. If you don't follow us on social media, it's Joe Cunningham SC, and our website is joeforsouthcarolina.com, where you can get all information about our race and our campaign. Very, very exciting couple months, particularly this week. And I'm thrilled to join you all here tonight. I think the timing is exceptional because this past Monday, we rolled out our plan for legalization of marijuana in South Carolina. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about tonight. Because I think missing in politics today is just honesty. Honesty about what works, what also doesn't work. You know, our country has been fighting the war against marijuana for decades. And it's time for elected officials to admit that what we're doing has not been working. You know, and although there are career politicians who would rather live in the past, I prefer that we as South Carolinians look to the future. And that's why I'm running for governor, to bring South Carolina out of the past and into the future. And our marijuana laws are stuck in the past. They're not practical. They hurt more people than they help. They're based on myths, prejudice, and fear. So that's why I believe it's time to end the prohibition on marijuana in South Carolina. It's time to start regulating and taxing it. For too many years, you know, we've been burdened with the high cost of pursuing and incarcerating individuals for possession of marijuana and other low-level drug arrests. Today, South Carolina's murder rate has never been higher. And as a result, our law enforcement resources have never been more valuable. By legalizing and regulating marijuana, our law enforcement can focus on violent crimes, and they can more effectively target dangerous criminals and get them off the street and keep them off the street. But refocusing our law enforcement resources, that's just one effect that this policy will have. You know, another impact will be on our incredible veterans and any other person who needlessly suffers through a chronic illness. I had the pleasure of serving on the Veterans Affairs Committee in Congress for the last 2 years, and I heard firsthand from our nation's heroes. You know, there's Nathan, an Army veteran in Dorchester County. He served our country in Iraq, and he was injured by a roadside bomb. And I remember him telling me that he relives that tragedy at night, and the only thing that can help him sleep is the use of marijuana. You know, there's also a former Marine I spoke to who was given a prescription for opioids for an injury that he incurred, and you know, he refused to fill the prescription because he was afraid that he, like thousands of others, would fall into that cycle of addiction. And he told me what he wanted was the exact same thing that was legal in dozens of other states. It's truly shameful that we ask these heroes to defend our freedoms abroad. You know, we promise to take care of them when they return home, but then deny them the basic remedy that would help alleviate the pain that was incurred through their heroic acts. Or that our friends and family members who may be suffering through cancer or other chronic illness are denied the use of marijuana, which is proven to be a safer and more effective means of pain management. Look, this is about compassion. And when it comes to our veterans, this is about taking care of those who take care of us. And it's about taking care of our family, our friends, our neighbors, so they don't suffer needlessly. Our marijuana laws continue to have a disproportionate impact on communities of color too, because a person of color is nearly 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than someone who's white, even though that they use marijuana at the exact same rate. You know, lives have been ruined over a possession of small amounts of marijuana. And such arrests have turned thousands of South Carolinians into criminals when their acts would be completely legal in so many other states. And you know, that makes it much more difficult for them to get a job, go to college, or get a loan. And my proposal calls for expunging the records of anyone convicted of a low-level marijuana-related offense, giving those people a second chance at life. Because expunging these records will allow countless South Carolinians to have a more productive and successful life for them and their families. And not to mention, regulating and taxing marijuana would generate tens of millions of dollars in new tax revenue. allowing our state to finally provide critical funding to fix our schools and roads, expand Medicaid, give our hardworking teachers the pay raise that they deserve, or even substantially cut taxes on South Carolina families. While it's unclear that how much revenue would be generated by regulation and taxing, Oregon, which has an even smaller population than South Carolina, brought in $133 million in revenue from marijuana taxes in 2020 alone. We could do a lot of good and help a lot of people with that money. And we should. And the attitudes towards marijuana are shifting rapidly. A recent poll performed back in April showed that 70% of Americans support legalizing marijuana, including 62% of Republicans and 67% of independents. The people are no longer divided on this issue. It's the politicians that haven't come around. Politicians like Henry McMaster, who've spent their entire career perpetuating the myths about marijuana, scaring people into thinking it's more dangerous than it is, and worst of all, keeping it out of the hands of the people that need it most. I think it's time to tell the truth. Be honest. This governor might be stuck in the past, but I'm not. The war on marijuana was never based on science. It was never based on practical measures. It was based on fear, prejudice, and lies. And our state needs leaders who are going to be honest about the failures of the war on marijuana, and honest about the cost of it too. I'm going to be a governor who can admit when a policy fails, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that the prohibition of marijuana has done exactly that. We owe this, to our men and women who have served our country bravely. We owe this to those who suffer chronic illnesses, who just want relief from pain. We owe it to the communities of color that have been unfairly impacted by these archaic laws. And we owe it to our economy, farmers and entrepreneurs, to not turn our back on this incredible financial opportunity. Because ideas like these are the differences between a leader of the future and leaders who are stuck in the past. I want to thank you all again for having me here tonight, and I'm happy to open up this discussion. Thanks again, Scott.
Find the right button there. There we go. Thank you, Joe. I'm going to start off. I'm going to kind of lead the team. We're going to take it around in a cycle here, but I'm going to start with the first two questions, if you don't mind. First one is that, let me kind of get my little notes here. Many proponents of cannabis legalization find home grow for both medical and recreational use to be important. Hal from Charleston wants to know where you stand on signing bills for home grow specifically, and if you are for it, what kind of caps you would put on recreational and medicinal home grows.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, there are other states that have, homegrown's been legalized in many other states. And, they've been moving towards legalizing recreational cannabis. And I think we can use other states' measures, what they've done in places where they've legalized it for recreational and medical, as kind of a blueprint for how we lay this out. And obviously, this can be something that I have to work with the state legislature on to do, but obviously carve outs that would accommodate that.
Okay, thank you. This one I happen to want to ask one of my own questions. I noticed in your plan, and I want you all folks to know, if you look in the chat, I shared the link to Joe's plan on marijuana reform. And so I noticed in your plan, it talks about saving taxpayer dollars by lowering the administrative costs of legal costs of prosecuting marijuana cases, and by allowing officers to be more efficient at solving violent crime and not be distracted by cannabis possession. What I am interested in knowing a little bit more about is your position on civil asset forfeiture in the state, and can you address that for me a little bit?
Yeah, I think with civil asset forfeiture, obviously, we're keeping discussion on marijuana related offenses. We talked about the civil asset forfeiture as it relates to marijuana offenses. We're going to have to bend to accommodate the new law, just like expungement of records will as well. So, those changes, anything related to civil asset forfeiture as relates to the laws that would be changed would have to be changed as well, though.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on to our Deputy Director, Kristen Mumert. Kristen, if you would.
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Kristen, as Scott said. And my first question for you is regarding South Carolina's veterans. I know that you did talk about this a little bit already, but South Carolina's veterans do make up about 10% of our adult population. And despite all that they've given for our country, they've also been historically underserved. Veterans Michael from Lexington and Kevin from Myrtle Beach want to know if you will support veteran access to medical cannabis, including personal cultivation and VA facilitated access. And they also want to know if veterans and South Carolina citizens alike will have their Second Amendment rights protected as medical cannabis users.
Yeah, I touched a little bit about this on my opening remarks. This is a big reason in pushing this thing forward is by compassionate care and providing people the remedy that they need. And the veterans that have come up to me during roundtable discussions or out in public that told me about their PTSD or other chronic illnesses. This is about fulfilling a promise to them. And again, I meet a lot of people who don't want to fill that prescription for opioids, who want, the use of marijuana. And that's been the most consistent and reliable form of relief for them. So that's the reason we're doing it, at least one of the big reasons. And this has no effect on anybody's Second Amendment rights. These issues are completely independent of each other, as the way I see it. And this is about like I said, honoring our promise to veterans. When I served on the Veterans Affairs Committee, I had the incredible experience of providing relief and resources to our veterans, and worked closely with Scott Isaacs here at the Charleston VA Hospital. In giving veterans better access to resources. My bill, the VA Telehearing Modernization Act, passed the House and the Senate and was signed into law by President Trump. And what that bill did was allowed veterans to appeal their benefits claims from the comfort of their own home, just like we're talking here tonight through Zoom or Skype. A lot of folks may not realize that there's so many veterans without family or friends or colleagues around, and they don't have access to a car. And so if one of their benefits gets denied, getting to Columbia or down to Savannah or somewhere else is a chore. And having those benefits denied is a big, big deal. And so allowing them the flexibility to do just this, it may seem like a small issue, but it has such large ramifications. My dad was a Vietnam vet, so this is something that's near and dear to me. That honoring our promises is the core of it. When someone signs on a dotted line to our country saying, "Send me anywhere in the world to defend our freedoms, and I'll pay I'll put it all on the line." It's important that when they come back home, we treat them with the respect that they deserve. And right now that's not happening because we're not giving them access to resources like this, like the ones that are seeking medical marijuana. And, this is just indicative of our governor being stuck in the past. This is a slam dunk issue in my mind. There's no reason why our veterans should be having to turn to opioids and fill in those prescriptions whenever marijuana has proven time and time again to provide a better means of relief. So I would tell any of the veterans who are listening right now that this is their big reason why we're putting a lot of energy, time, and momentum behind this issue.
Thank you. My second question for you is nearly 2.3 million South Carolina citizens are in the workforce, and many of those jobs enforce strict drug-free workplace policies. Those policies discriminate against cannabis and CBD users alike, despite the fact that having THC metabolites in your urine does not indicate an individual's ability to work well. Will you be a proponent for the removal of mandatory testing for THC for jobs that are not covered under the National Transportation Agency?
Yes, great question. I mean, look, once we legalize marijuana in South Carolina, and we will, it's important that any other laws changed to reflect that. And so it's not fair to drug test somebody for, having used marijuana 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then penalize them in their job for something that is legal. So there are going to have to be some shifts in other, whether it be, state employment contracts or otherwise, to be reflective of the changes that we're going to make.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the night now to Michael Knight, who is another member of our board.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Kristen. And a pleasure to meet you, Joe. My first question touches on your opening remarks. The plan also mentions raising revenue through legalization and responsible regulation. Historically, revenue has also been achieved through the taxation of recreational products. How do you see these funds being reallocated and or used?
It's good to meet you, Michael. Thanks for joining tonight. And look, there's I was having a conversation with a couple last night about this, and the bad news is there's no shortage of problems here in South Carolina. You look across the board, we're dead last in education, in infrastructure, we're dead last in vaccine distribution, and we're being eclipsed by other southern states like Alabama and Mississippi, who used to be behind us, but now we're finding ourselves at the bottom of the pack. There's a lot of ways in which we could use this money, and we launched a 46 county tour to go around the state and talk to folks, whether it be in person, on Zoom groups like this. And my dad always told me that God gave us twice as many ears as He did mouths, because He wanted us to listen twice as much as He did talk. And so we're going around the state, and we're meeting with people in the PD area, in the corridor of shame. We're talking about the shortcomings in our education system. And when we're coming up through I-26 and we're stopping off at communities, we're talking about the traffic, the congestion with our infrastructure. We're hearing about the 745 structurally deficient bridges in our state. And in light of recent events down in South Florida, I think all of us are a little bit concerned about our infrastructure. And infrastructure is about, we think about concrete and steel, but that's not what it's about. It's about, our loved ones traveling over bridges, going to soccer practice, going to school. It's about, we think about our education system, and we think about paying our teachers more. And yeah, that's what we're aiming for, but it's also about our kids, grandkids getting the proper education. So, I say that to say, Michael, that there's a lot of ways in which we could use this revenue. There could be tax breaks for people as well. And, we're going to spend the next few months going around the state and going to every single corner and talking to folks about their ideas and the ways in which we could best utilize that revenue. But one thing's for sure, this is going to be a significant increase in tax revenue for our state, and we want to use it in a way that affects everybody. Just like a rising tide lifts all boats. We want to make sure that I see this as an economic opportunity. The jobs and the farming, that's one side of it, but the taxing and the revenue generated is something else too. And I think that it can be used to impact everybody. But we'd like to finish going across the state and hearing people's concerns, so that it's a way that lifts everybody up.
Appreciate that. And my next question is kind of two parts. Other states have seen national corporations take control of the state marijuana market. I would like to see revenue stay in the South Carolina economy. Will safeguards be put in place to support the growth of small farm and businesses in creating a marijuana economy in South Carolina? Along with that, what are your plans to support the growth of the industrial hemp production in South Carolina?
Great questions, Michael. I was at a farmer's market in Columbia, and I ran into two African-American farmers, brothers, that were there selling their produce. And I was asking them, I knew that, but I worked on farms in high school, either baling hay or housing tobacco. And I I learned at a very young age, that's hard work. It's very hard work. And that's part of the reason why people are getting out of that industry, why families are getting out of it. You know, the two brothers I talked to in Columbia were telling me that, you know, their kids aren't interested in it. And it's really sad too, because it's a very honorable and good way to make a living. Another reason why people are getting out of the business is because it's become so difficult and expensive as well. And we're prioritizing, you know, either grants or tax incentives to these out-of-state companies. I think we need to provide those incentives to South Carolinians. I think we need to take care of our own before we start worrying about giving tax breaks to other people and other companies. I think there need to be safeguards in place that prioritize South Carolina families and South Carolina owned businesses, particularly small businesses or minority owned businesses. You know, this governor has given so many tax breaks to out of state corporations that have not held up their end of the bargain. They just haven't. You know, and it's very well documented. We need, you know, if we're giving out tax, and again, I don't have any problem giving out tax incentives to companies when they uphold their end of the deal. But you can't come into South Carolina and produce low wage jobs and then underproduce on the amount of the jobs. But that's what we're seeing right now, because this governor is not holding any of these businesses accountable. So prioritizing, focusing on South Carolina businesses, particularly those smaller businesses, family-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. We need to make this a South Carolina issue. And we need to take care of our own before we worry about taking care of people outside the state.
Thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Vaughn for a few more questions.
What's going on, Joe? My name is Vaughn Postema, but you can call me VP because we're cool like that.
Hey, Vaughn, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks again for being here. And once again, thanks to everybody that's listening on the interwebs and in Zoom and such. I want to go back a little bit. We've kind of touched on this in a few different ways. Medical cannabis, right, is currently available 41 states. South Carolina, as we know, has been discussing introducing medical laws multiple times in the past year, and that includes that Compassionate Care Act. But there's been a lot of red tape language around who is able to access it, and even some of the things that you can suffer from in terms of like legality things when it comes to this particular Compassionate Care Act, just concerning a lot of people. And so Rose from Mount Pleasant asked if it's possible to pass medical laws without the numerous restrictions that often prevent people from receiving the care they need. Could you expound a little bit on that? Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why we've come out for full legalization, you know, recreational and medical. This provides clarity. And, you know, what we see, I think it's important. We had a press conference on Monday where we had representatives from farmers, veterans, law enforcement. And, you know, some states do this jump to medical and then to recreational. But I think we just need to go open up for medical and recreational so that there's clarity, so that people have, you know, a clear understanding on what's, you know, the legalities behind it. And an important thing to note is that there's no state that has legalized this, either medical or recreational, that's gone backwards, you know, that's rescinded that law. And that's because it works, because the sky doesn't fall, because what we find is that crime goes down, opioid use goes down, revenue goes up, and, you know, all these states are benefiting from it and enjoying the tax revenue from it. And South Carolina, here we are back at the bottom of the list for infrastructure education. Look, I talk about this a lot. I grew up in a dry county. It didn't sell alcohol. And what happened is that surrounding counties around that place started to go wet, and they started to sell alcohol. And the county I grew up in saw the jobs and the tax dollars start going to surrounding areas. And then eventually that county went wet as well. And then because they realized that the sky didn't fall.
and that that all these negative effects were overblown, just like all of Henry McMaster's opinions about legalization are overblown, and the data suggests the same thing. So I just believe that by opening up for medical and recreational, people aren't caught in this quandary where they have to ask so many questions about whether or not they can get a card for it, how they access it, and so forth. I think it just provides a lot more clear direction for constituents and South Carolinians.
Yeah, absolutely. I like something that you said in there when you were saying that these states, they're not going backwards, right? And another great point to that is that the flip side of that is that they're not going backwards, and yet they're constantly finding ways to revamp so that their forward can be even better. And
Yeah.
I'm curious about this because you talked about this stat in the beginning, especially like that data from the ACLU that shows the arrests that disproportionately affect Black individuals. A Black person in South Carolina is 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white person. And that was in 2018. And in some counties, that number is as high as 8.5, which is super wild.
In the upstate, we were looking at counties in the upstate. And I think it may have been Anderson or Pickens or something, but the numbers on there were, that like you said, that was just the average of 3.5. But there are some parts of the state where it's truly appalling.
Exactly. And, and there's South Carolina still ranking up there nationally. Like, I think like 7 counties are up in the at least top 20 or so. And so with that, like when we talk about revamping moving forward, I'm curious how you might invest resources into crafting a sustainable and fair social equity act that would complement legalization and decriminalization of marijuana in South Carolina. Because I think that South Carolina is in a unique position. We're very much behind, yet we have so many examples in front of us. So I'm curious as to how you'll use what is already existing in other states to help piece together something like a social equity act that South Carolinians could benefit from.
Yeah, well, Vaughn, this comes down to being honest with everybody, being honest with each other, and realizing the impacts that this war on marijuana has had, and the carnage that it's left behind, lives that have been wrecked over a bag of weed, and we got a lot to repair. I think it takes elected officials and people being honest with one another. The impacts it's had, and just the day to day for folks who have something on their record for marijuana, who have missed opportunities, like I said, can't get a job, can't get the loan, can't get a car. I mean, these are big impacts for folks. And so that's why it's important that whenever we legalize marijuana and expunging the records of these marijuana related offenses, low level offenses, is critically important as well, and having a clean slate. So there's getting this across the finish line, getting this legalized is obviously the main objective, but correcting the mistakes of the past is right there along with it, and realizing and being, like I said, being honest with each other as to this has had a significantly more impact on communities of color than it has white people. And you need elected officials who be honest with folks about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty amazing because in Illinois, from their legalization, there came a lot of information about those disparities across the state, and the different communities that really kind of were shortchanged during this war on drugs. So it kind of goes, I'm going to go back to another question that my comrade Michael kind of touched on a little bit, is about the cannabis economy. And I'm gonna selfishly say I'm really interested in this because I am a minority small business owner in the cannabis industry. So I am definitely interested in what's going on in the economy of cannabis in South Carolina. And so I'm really interested in how would you support vertical integration for cannabis business owners, and kind of that whole licensing, um, this licensing capabilities and what would be available to people. And I do have a two-part question, and this one is more focused on the future, and then I'll get to the present. But how would you approach that, or has your team thought about that?
Well, as it relates to, licensing, providing clarity to businesses, and not just say we're going to give 20 licenses to the largest 20 companies. It's a matter of making sure that our the small businesses, small family owned farms are sustainable. And there's a lot of, the good thing is, good thing about being almost last in this is there are a lot of blueprints available. A lot of states have done this, and uh, we can learn from the mistakes that other states have made, and also take the good things away from it as well. But this is, I view this as a huge economic opportunity. And again, this is about taking care of our own, taking care of South Carolina families and South Carolina businesses. So I don't see it as we're going to have 10 or 20 licenses and we're going to give them to the biggest farms in the entire state. This should be a level playing field for everybody, whether it be on the agricultural side or on the the commercial storefront side. But there's going to have to be some structure in place, and I know for Columbia that sounds like a stranger for them, but when I'm governor, we're going to institute a lot more of that structure, and have a responsible fashion of governing, and also of a level playing field as it relates to commercial enterprise.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about structure, because that leads into kind of the second question that kind of has to do more with the present, right? And in our current cannabis economy, right? Because hemp is still cannabis.
Yeah.
And so we know that we have, hemp here in the state. We have a hemp program. And I'm curious that in this time between, going for this governor's seat, and during that road, in terms of what's already in place, how do you plan on helping provide clearer hemp guidelines or even laws for South Carolina citizens and business owners? I mean, there's a lot of confusion centered around the Attorney General's opinion versus what is law. Is hemp flower legal? All of these very confusing things, and there's no one that's really kind of setting that structure. We got different municipalities that have different ways of doing things, and it's kind of hard to get your footing in something like hemp. So how do you intend on helping that?
Hey, look, Vaughn, this is from the same governor who during a pandemic allowed DHEC to go without a director. All right, our state health agency went without a director for a year or so during the middle of a pandemic. So it's no surprise there won't be any structure or guidelines in place. And I was talking to Jason yesterday, who's a hemp farmer. He joined us for our press conference on Monday, and they came out to our event last night. And he was telling me about the protocols and the structure in place as to what kind of inspections and things like that. And Jason's a very responsible farmer who does everything by the book and by the rules. But he was telling me that there's a serious just gap in oversight and inspections.
Absolutely.
And that can be. I mean, look, like I said, Jason plays by the rules, but not everybody's like Jason. And what happens is you get a lot of people who may take advantage of the system and may try to get a competitive edge by bending the rules. But that's why we need some more structure in place. And by regulating and taxing marijuana, that's going to provide, it's going to more than pay for that as well because of the revenue that it brings in. But when you're not bringing in much revenue at all or tax dollars, then you're not going to have that structure in place. And so, right now it's like the state's kind of dipping its toe in it, but doesn't really want the responsibility. It's kind of hands off. But by carrying through with our proposal, we're going to have the funds necessary to build that infrastructure and provide the quality assurance or the basically consumer confidence that products are made to a specific standard. And, right now under South Carolina's laws and regulations, that just doesn't exist.
Now I was trying to find the button that time, Scott. Um, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. I'm actually going to kick it to man Scott to kind of take over after this. Thank you so much for answering these questions.
Thanks, Vaughn.
All right. Basically, it was kicked back to me to kind of wrap it up, but I do want to sort of pose, I guess, another little question here, because it's in the news, of course, today, the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, what I've been calling the Schumer-Wyden-Booker Act for a while, because we weren't sure what the name was going to be actually until it was introduced today. We knew they were working on it. Is basically the new version of the Senate's old MORE Act, which I believe you voted for back in December 2020. Is that correct?
That's correct. Well, hold on. December 2020? Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, I don't know about the date.
Right. Yeah, it was right at the very end. Yep, it was right at the very end of that that legislature there. I want to say December 4th, actually. I think that was the date. Anyway, this is kind of the new version of it. I haven't really read through it yet.
Date though, Scott.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, I said I know I supported it. I just wasn't sure on the date of it. That's why that's why I was asking.
Oh yeah, I knew you supported it. I think it was December 4th, if I remember correctly. Historic date for marijuana legislation in the United States. So one of those kind of close to my heart so far. Now, with that mentioned as current news, we're talking about an election for the general here in South Carolina in November 2022. So we've got a little bit of a year away till we get to that point. I'm hopeful and very hopeful that we move federally forward before we get to that November date next year for the general elections here and do deschedule. If that happens, and if you win the governorship in South Carolina, fingers crossed, I still believe you'll be facing a conservative majority House and legislature. Do you think that you will have enough evolved opinions toward cannabis by that time to be able to persuade one of them to draft some of the legislation that we're talking about to legalize cannabis in South Carolina? Mainly, I ask because I know that generally democratically drafted legislation in South Carolina, when it's controlled by the Republican legislature and House, tends to die in committee. So is that sort of your hope in moving things forward in South Carolina, is persuading some Republican legislators to draft that legislation?
Absolutely. I mean, Scott, that's what we do. It's what I've done the last 2 years in Congress. You're talking to, like I said, I've been ranked the most bipartisan, most effective members in Congress in the 116th session. And, having bills that make it through a divided Congress and signed into law by a Republican president. I mean, I can point to specific examples of me talking Republicans into voting for my bills on the House floor and bringing Republicans on board. And this is what I've been doing the last several years. And I would say, Scott, that this is where the people are. This isn't a fringe movement or anything. This is where the majority of Americans are. We stand in solidarity here. And the fact is, if legislators cannot get on board, then they need to be replaced. If they don't accurately reflect the will of South Carolinians in their district or in their area, that's why we have elections. All right, is to replace people who will be a reflection, who will be a proper voice, not somebody who will just pay tribute to a special interest group or who's consistently voting on one thing because it's even when it's against the will of their constituents. So that's what elections are for. But I'd say as far as bringing Republicans along and getting bipartisan support, no one can do it better than me.
All right, thank you for that. Last but not least, before I kind of wrap things up, do you have any final words for our attendance tonight?
Yeah, I would just call back to our website, which is in the chat session, and I want to thank everybody for attending here tonight. And I would just say that we were building a strong campaign, unlike anything South Carolina has ever seen before. We're doing things differently. We're going to be very straightforward, very honest, and we're going to go to every single corner of the state. And we cannot do this alone. And so we need to start building this out during the off year. You can go to joeforsouthcarolina.com if you want to volunteer, if you want to donate. We need every single person on this team though, because this is going to be a fight. But we've won tough races before. You know, we flipped a district that was rated R+10. So we can flip a state when it's R+8. And so I would encourage everybody who's able to be part of our team, and because we're already putting people to work. And I want to thank you all for what you do, and look forward to chatting more here in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate you being with us here tonight. I'm just going to sort of wrap it up then with our crew here and thank everybody for joining us. You know, if you need to find me, you can reach out to me at normalsc.org and go to our contact page, or email us at normalsouthcarolina@gmail.com. Don't forget to visit our social media on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where if you happen to miss any of our meetings, you can watch them as a recording over there on our YouTube channel. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all here again next Wednesday night, as with every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. for the South Carolina Normal Cannabis Conversation. With that, I want to thank you again for being here, and have a nice night. Bye-bye, y'all.